Lord Vader. Lord Vader, can you hear me? These were the first words that made it through Vader's audio receivers when he arose on the medical table. The last thing he remembered was searing, unyielding pain of fire scorching him down to his very organ tissue. He had lost his arm and his legs to his old friend, and had lost his wife, his unborn children, and his entire life as a Jedi, as the Chosen One. He even lost some of the power that defined his path of darkness. All he had left of him was a tomb of obsidian armor, cybernetic prosthetics, and the empire that he had chosen over his destiny. And of course, a new master, Darth Sidious. The pain and rage of all of it was too much for him to bear. He had destroyed everything in his life, even the Jedi, even his family, for the sake of saving his wife, only to learn that he had failed her too, just as he had his mother. The dark side swelled within him, lashed out at everything nearby, crushing all the medical droids, nearly destroying the entire room that had made him. But none of that mattered now. The man he wanted to kill was untouchable. The only thing left to his name was the dark side. And going from the hero with the heart of gold to the most feared Dark Lord of the Sith in galactic history was a quick and a slippery slope. But what happened immediately after this? After Anakin woke up on the operating table as a new monster of the dark side? What were his first steps as a champion of evil? And what did he do with all of his newfound rage as Darth Vader? Well, today, my friends, we will be documenting the entire first year that Anakin spent as Darth Vader. Thank you so much for opening this holocron, my friends, as today we have a very special documentary. In this holocron, we are going to be cataloging everything that happened in Darth Vader's first year, and for this video, we will be exclusively deferring to Legends or the EU material, since that is lesser known, and Darth Vader truly gets into a lot of trouble and struggles here. But if you would like to see a canon version of this video, we will entertain that idea. But as for today, we will be looking into the annals of the Legends novels, as well as comics, to learn everything that Darth Vader did in the year 19 BBY. So now, sit back, relax, focus your hatred, because now we are going to dive into Vader, Year 1, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. This is how it feels to be Anakin Skywalker forever. The first dawn of the light of the universe brings pain. The light burns you. The light will always burn you. Part of you will always lie upon black glass sand beside a lake of fire while flames chew away at your flesh. You can hear yourself breathing. It comes hard and fast. It is harsh, and it scrapes the nerves already raw. But you cannot stop it. You will never be able to stop it. You cannot even slow it down. You don't even have lungs anymore. Mechanisms hardwired into your chest breathe for you now. They pump oxygen into your bloodstream forever. Rising from the operating table, Vader would finally realize the ultimate irony of the dark side, the ultimate trap of the Sith. Yourself is all you will ever have when you pursue the way of the Sith. Vader's rage, the screaming, filled the air as he reached out through the Force to crush Palpatine, the man who made him. But he could not. At that moment, he was too weak to do anything about what he had done, what had been done to him. It is said that he was like a painter gone blind, a composer gone deaf. He could remember where the power was, but the power that he could now reach was only a memory. Instead of crushing Sidious, he crushed the droids, the equipment, the table that he was strapped to. In the end, he cannot kill Palpatine. In the end, he doesn't even want to, because the Emperor is all that he has left now, the only thing that gives his life purpose and meaning. Because with the Empire came duty and a realization of power. But it would be quite a fit before Lord Vader would actually do anything for Palpatine or this Grand Empire. He was so much less than he had been before. And for the first 4 weeks after his awakening, he would learn how to live in his new cybernetic body. Life inside of Lord Vader's armor was nothing short of a living hell. Being something of a tinkerer and very good with machines, Anakin had become accustomed to rebuilding droids, working on engines, ships, and land speeders. Not only that, but Anakin had upgraded the mechanics that controlled his original artificial hand, the one which had been given to him by Dooku. And because of that, he was utterly dismayed with the incompetence shown by the medical droids that rebuilt him under Palpatine's direct supervision. It quickly became clear to Vader that Palpatine had intentionally done a botched job under his direct orders in an effort to punish and to challenge him, a job that he succeeded in. because this is what he had to deal with. Sidious had rebuilt Vader using research information that he had taken from General Grievous's cybernetic transformation, but instead of upgrading on what had made Grievous so deadly, he decided to use downgrades to make it even more difficult for the new Dark Lord. What remained of his real limbs ended in bulbs of grafted flesh, inserted into machines that triggered movement through the use of modules that interfaced with his damaged nerve endings. But instead of using Durasteel, the mechanical droids had substituted an inferior alloy, and had failed to inspect the strips that protected the electromotive lines. As a result, the inner lining of the pressurized bodysuit was continually snagging on places or strips where they anchored to the knee or the ankle joints of Lord Vader. They had also added syntheskin. This substituted for what was seared away from his bones and itched incessantly, and his body needed to be periodically cleansed of it, scrubbing away the necrotic flesh. The tall boots were a poor fit for his artificial feet, whose claw-like toes lacked the electrostatic sensitivity of the equally false fingertips that he now possessed. Raised in the heel, the cumbersome footwear canted him slightly forward, forcing him to move with exaggeration, or else he stumbled or toppled over. Worse, they were so heavy in fact that he often felt rooted to the ground, as if he were moving in high gravity. For the first little while, Vader had to call upon the power of the Force itself just to make sure that he stayed upright and walked correctly. The defects in his prosthetic arms mirrored those of his legs as well. Only the right one felt natural, as the left one had a problem to where the mechanisms that supplied articulation and support were sometimes very slow to respond. But it went further. The heavy cloak and the pectoral plating restricted his movements so that he could scarcely lift his arms over his head if he wanted to, and he had already been forced to adapt to his lightsaber techniques in order to compensate for these new weaknesses. Not only this, but several parts of his bodysuit did not fit his prosthetics correctly, causing it to snag and bunch in certain places, such as with the wrists, adding to Vader's frustration. Darth Sidious had fashioned the design of his helmet to resemble both a human skull and that of an ancient Sith war droid. Vader had despised both inspirations, as he resented the idea of being mistaken for a droid when he was a living being. The dark hemispheres that covered his eyes filtered out light that could have caused further injury to his damaged corneas and retinas. But in an enhanced mode, the half-globes reddened the light and prevented him from being able to see the toes of his boots without pushing his head forward nearly 90 degrees. The Medroids rebuilt the cartilage of his outer ears, but his eardrums, having melted away in the burning, had been beyond repair. All sound now had to be transmitted directly into implants in his inner ear, and sounds registered as if it was coming underwater to Vader. Worse, the implanted sensors lacked sufficient discrimination, so too many ambient sounds were being picked up. Distance and direction were very difficult to determine at first. Sometimes the sensors would pick up feedback, or attached echo, or latch onto the vibration of the faintest noise. His miserable existence continued, or perhaps even worsened, when we talk about what it was like to breathe as Darth Vader. From a control box where he wore that was strapped to his chest, a thick cable entered his torso, linked to a breathing apparatus and a heartbeat regulator. The ventilator was directly inserted into his hideously scarred chest, along with tubes that ran directly into his damaged lungs. Others would enter his throat. But just to add even more insult to injury, Palpatine ensured that the monitoring panel beeped frequently, beeping for seemingly no reason. Along with this, the incessant rasp of his breathing interfered with his ability to rest, let alone ever sleep. At this point in time, Vader hadn't yet set up his bacta tank to sleep or to meditate in, so he was having to do so while still within his suit. But even in the rare moments that sleep came to him, it was plagued with nightmares. But how did the Dark Lord eat? Vader could take food directly through his mouth, but only when he was inside of a hyperbaric chamber, as in order to do this, Vader would need to remove the respiratory vent on his mask. Because of this, it was easier to simply receive nourishment through liquids. Usually this meant Vita paste. This was fed directly to him through a tube in the front of his mask. Otherwise, Vader would receive nourishment directly into the bloodstream through an IV. To deal with the liquid or the solid waste that came afterwards, Vader would rely on catheters, collection pouches, and recyclers. But all the devices made it even more difficult for him to move with any sort of ease, let alone grace and precision. Vader was a prisoner in solitary confinement, a dead man walking in an upright coffin. More than once, Vader gave in to panic and desperation, directly because of claustrophobia. It wouldn't be too long until he began to make preparations for a bacta tank in a meditation chamber. But speaking of meditation, it wasn't just like his relationship with his body and his suit that was injured in his duel with Kenobi, but the relationship with the Force itself. While Vader retained his knowledge of the Jedi arts, he felt uncertain about his place in the Force, and while by now he had taken his first steps into the dark side, he was uncertain about his ability to command it, to sustain any real power. These passionate fires which had driven him to save his wife were now gone. All Vader had left was guilt, bitterness, and regret. Vader had accepted that Anakin was a different man, a different life from one that he had now, and yet he still acknowledged that a part of that Jedi was still hurting, burning away within him. Early, Darth Vader hated the Force. In fact, he cursed it, believing that it had provided him nothing but pain, torturing him with foresight, with visions that he was unable to prevent, both of his mother and now his wife. It led him to believe that he had great power when he was little more than its servant. But now Vader promised himself that he would no longer live that way. The power of the dark side would render the Force subservient to him. The Force was viewed by Darth Vader as a minion over ally. This was his current view on the Force, and this was a miserable beginning of Darth Vader's first year. It was only a week into the suit, and Vader would construct his new lightsaber. Although Sidious expressed that the Sith had grown beyond the weapon, they continued to use it to humiliate the Jedi. Vader, as the Emperor's enforcer, would still require a weapon of his own to strike fear in the hearts of the enemy. To that end, Palpatine provided him with a red synthetic crystal, access to all the materials that he would need, and even Palpatine's personal lightsaber to serve as a model for the Dark Lord. In the shadow of the first Death Star's skeleton, Darth Vader constructed his new blade, hoping to fashion the perfect Sith weapon to please his new master. However, Vader accidentally ended up making a dark side corruption of Anakin's lightsaber. This happened when he studied Sidious's lightsaber and found its construction to be somewhat lacking. While Vader appreciated the craftsmanship of the Dark Lord's blade, he regarded it more as an antique, a piece of jewelry rather than a true weapon that dealt death. He would need to create something more suitable for his new body. His hands were too large to duplicate the loose grip that Anakin had favored. Anakin had loved to duel with his right hand wrapped around the crystal housing cylinder, close to the blade itself. Vader's hands required that the grip be thicker and longer, and the result was an inelegant weapon, verging on ungainly. He had hoped to at least be able to keep his fighting style intact, but that was no longer possible either. Before, Anakin had used a beautiful melding of Gemso and Ataru, but the movements that had characterized his perfect mix of power and agility were unable to be executed by Vader in his new armor. It would actually be a long time before Vader figured out how to create a new style, one that was perfectly suited for killing Jedi. But this is a young Vader, nearly an infant, and although this would all come with time, it would begin with the very first mission as the Emperor's enforcer. Sidious instructs Vader to deal with an issue that has arisen on the planet of Martynas, which has been the main front of the Clone Wars. A clone squadron there has deliberately disobeyed Order 66 and has even helped the escape of 3 Jedi Knights. This is again Legends continuity, written prior to the idea of the inhibitor chips. In the expanded universe, there were a few clones, although few and far in between, that disobeyed Order 66 for one reason or another. In this case, it was a mix of 2 reasons. Firstly, the clones had become very bonded and loyal to the Jedi generals, as war had forged an unshakable bond. And the second reason, they had thought that Order 66 and the transmission was a separatist trick. At the time, they thought it didn't make any sense to fire upon their commanding officers. But Vader was sent to deal with the dissidents publicly, to show the error of insubordination in the new era of the Empire. Knowing that a few of the Jedi had survived Order 66, Vader asked his master what he should do with them. Sidious met the question with displeasure, and expressed that he wasn't interested in Vader's pathetic former friends. He only wanted the clone troopers punished. However, he did acquiesce, and told Vader that if he had happened to come across any Jedi, then he could of course kill them. This was the start of Lord Vader's trend, becoming obsessed with hunting and killing Jedi, and Sidious finding it to be an aggravation if anything, a huge point of contention in their relationship moving forward, especially in the first year. Sidious had no interest in killing all of the Jedi, though he put his bounties out on them. Sidious relished in the idea of the Jedi wallowing in their failure, being forced to run and hide like rats, watching their precious Republic turn against them. Sidious wanted to subject them to the same fear, the same humiliation that the Sith had suffered for over 1,000 years. Not to mention, he was wanting Vader to let go of the old life of a Jedi, become fully one with the path of the Sith, to join him in running the Empire, for Vader to be obsessed with taking revenge on the Jedi by slaughtering them as often as he could, displayed a great lack of growth. And so, The primary mission that Lord Vader was on was to punish the dissenters, not to hunt Jedi. But Vader saw things much differently. Vader needed a fight, and when he went to Martynas and made his first public appearance, one would be waiting. Many of the clones did not originally know what to think of Vader, and at first they thought he could have been a new type of elite trooper, a personal droid for the Emperor. But that all changed when he brandished his lightsaber, killing all the dissenting clones in cold blood. The other troopers were nervous, uncertain of what to think about him after seeing the lightsaber, but he assured them that he was no Jedi. But that was when one of the surviving Jedi, by the name of Buckley, revealed herself to openly challenge the new Sith. Vader deliberately called off the clones from surrounding and killing her. Vader wanted a duel. The fight was brief, but it was one that severely humbled the frustrated Lord Vader. He wasn't able to call upon the Force as well as he had as Anakin. Not only this, but learning to fight in his new armor caused his moves to be stiff and clunky. The echoes of Gemso and Ataru were lacking any finesse or distinguished style. Buckley even managed to slip his guard once and struck Vader on his right hand. Watching the duel were two other escaped Jedi who were hiding as separatist war prisoners, Master Roan Shrine and Oli Starstone. Shrine searched the Force for a proper course of action to perhaps help his friend against Vader, but instead of an answer or a call to action, the Force held him back. Despite Vader being unfamiliar with his new cybernetics, he was still incredibly dangerous. He was a monster, an animal. With a swift chop, he severed the young Jedi's arm before swiftly decapitating her, making her his first official Jedi kill. The duel had angered Vader more than anything though. Only Dooku, Ventress, and Obi-Wan had ever been good enough to injure him with the blade, and now he had been touched by an undistinguished young Jedi Knight. He began to wonder just how much power he had truly lost, if Sidious had crippled him on purpose, and if he had been sent out to die, to be mocked before he met his end. The two Jedi, Shrine and Starstone, managed to slip away from the POW camp and to use a criminal underground contact to secure escape from the world. But Vader had now taken it as a challenge to track them down and to kill them in the name of the Empire. He pursued their trail and interrogated the crime lord which had helped them. In the space over the world, Vader would chase down the Jedi with their ship, with him utilizing an all-black Actis-class Jedi interceptor. Despite all the losses that Vader had suffered, he was still the best star pilot in the galaxy, and he refused to let his limitations stop him here. However, after a very close chase, the Jedi managed to jump to hyperspace barely and evaded Vader's grasp. For now, Vader considered this mission to be a complete defeat, and he would return to the Emperor. Upon reaching Coruscant, the Dark Lord arrived at the Senate building right as Mon Mothma and Bail Organa were exiting a meeting with Palpatine. It was here that Bail discovered the truth of Anakin's survival when he heard one of the clones acknowledge Lord Vader by name. Luckily, the Sith didn't notice when Bail looked. The air had been nearly driven entirely out of his body, but Vader would meet with his master, too focused on the mission at hand, and he did not realize what Bail had learned. Vader would meet with his master in the Coruscant medical bay, which had been specifically engineered to tend to the two Sith Lords. Even Sidious had been accepting some medical therapy to soothe his injuries that he received from his own Force lightning, though the new scars were permanent. Vader was getting his right arm repaired from the lightsaber slash that he received, and the two Sith proceeded to have a deep conversation, one about the nature of their victory and the current state of life. It began with Sidious noticing the sheer amount of anger his apprentice was displaying over his limitations. Once again, he destroys one of the medical droids tending to him whenever it made a small mistake. Sidious did not gloat over Vader's injuries, but he was concerned about him and adopted a new tone of compassion. He first counseled his student the benefits of reserving his anger for times when he could profit from it, rather than release it with wild abandon on things that didn't matter like droids. Vader finally divulged why his arm was damaged in the first place, and that he had killed the Jedi responsible. But he then proceeded to blame the escape of the other two Jedi on the insufficiently equipped Star Destroyer, the limitations of his suit, and the delays of a new starfighter. Palpatine, though, chastises his pupil for throwing blame around like leaves in a storm, and reiterated that the Jedi mean nothing to the Sith, especially now. Palpatine made it clear that he was aware that dozens of Jedi likely slipped through the cracks of Order 66, and that Vader will soon have his fill of Jedi blood. But of greater importance is that their order is finished, and that they now grovel before the Sith. Vader then gestures both of their states of disfigurement and asks his master if they are the faces of victory truly. Palpatine is close to getting sickened by his apprentice's self-pity, but patiently answers him that they are not crude matter, that they are more, and that Vader will learn the truth of this lesson. The Dark Lord pounces on this, challenges his master, ordering to learn the truth that he once promised about saving Padme. Sidious has been waiting for Vader to bring this up for a month, and has a diplomatic answer. Palpatine simply reminds his friend that he had nothing to do with Padme's death. It was in fact Vader who killed her out of rage and anger. It was in fact lucky that he had arrived in time to save the life of his new apprentice. Once again, Vader has a rebuttal, and he asks what good is power without reward, without joy. Sidious, maintaining his patience for the time being, answers that soon he will come to learn that power is joy. Following the dark side comes with terrible risk, but great reward. It matters not how they appear, or who is sacrificed along the way. The galaxy is theirs. Vader then asks his master if he promised as much to Count Dooku. The apprentice has crossed the line, starting to get under Sidious's skin, as he stated that if he had been stronger in the dark side than Anakin, that he would be dead, and Dooku would be at his right hand instead of Vader. That's when Vader asks what would happen should Sidious encounter someone stronger than he is. The Sith Master, though, simply smiles, and reassures him that there is no one stronger, even though his body may now be crippled. Vader points out that he wasn't strong enough to defeat Obi-Wan at the time. And finally, Sidious has had enough. It is not insults against his master that finally breaks him, but it is self-pity that Sidious loathes. Sidious has had enough, and he attacks Vader with brutal honesty. "No, you weren't," he said. "So just imagine what Yoda may have done to you." Obi-Wan triumphed because he went to Mustafar with a single intention in mind: to kill Darth Vader. If the Jedi Order had showed such resolute intention, if it had remained focused on what needed to be done rather than fears of what the dark side was, it may have proved more difficult to topple and to eradicate. You and I may have lost everything. Do you understand? Their conversation ends on this tense note. Sidious begins to devise ways to shake Vader out of his place of despair. He needs an apprentice who is strong in the Force. That is what he has always wanted. In Sidious's mind, Vader's real weaknesses were psychological rather than anything physical, and for Vader to overcome them, he needed to be driven deeper into himself, to confront all his choices and all of his disappointments. To that end, the Master must send his apprentice straight back to the Jedi Temple under the guise of searching for Sith holocrons. Holocrons rumored to have been brought there long ago. However, Darth Vader knew the truth of why he was being sent back to the Jedi Temple. All the ghosts of his pasts, all the troubling actions he took there, they were all going to be rubbed in his face. During his walk through the corridors, his mind cannot help but conjure the images of what happened during Operation Nightfall. That night not so long ago. Vader's mind began to spiral as he remembered all the reasons why he had killed the Jedi and the younglings. He didn't do it because Sidious had asked him to. He did it because the Jedi would never have understood why he betrayed Mace, or the fact that he wanted to save his wife Padme. They may have even tried to take Padme and their child away from him. Vader continued to remember how he had tried to save his wife from her fear, save his friend Obi-Wan from his own ignorance, but neither of them had listened to him. He had intended on punishing Palpatine for manipulating the war against him all along. Vader's mind swirled around the fact that he had been manipulated by the Jedi, cheated by them. He had been played by the Jedi, now the Emperor, and finally, the Force itself. His anger mounted so much that his breathing became ragged. His respirator and heart monitor were having a difficult time pumping and functioning. His own rage almost made him go into cardiac arrest. But it is here when Vader realized something. For the sake of his own health, Vader was going to need to avoid places that whipped him into a frenzy of rage, such as the Jedi Temple. And with that came the realization that he would never return to Tatooine or Naboo ever again. This thought alone made the Force lash out against Vader as he released his anguish in a groan, toppling over bookshelves, destroying pedestals of bronzenium statues in the now ruins of the Jedi archives. After this, Palpatine would dispatch Vader to Alderaan on one of his first official missions as the Emperor's emissary to a new world. He was there to collect Senator Fang Zar, a senator who had fled Imperial questioning on Coruscant and was seeking asylum under Bail Organa until he could secure escape from the world. Palpatine found out about this escape, but the friend that the senator was waiting for just happened to be the same crime lord from the world of Martynas that had aided the Jedi in their flight against Darth Vader and against the Empire. He had realized that all of these things linked together, and so went Darth Vader personally to deal with the situation, hoping that sharpening his anger against the Jedi would help Darth Vader to overcome any mental blockages. Arriving on Alderaan, the Dark Lord was less than thrilled to be acting as the Emperor's errand boy. He had hoped to have actually started his Sith training by now, officially under a new Dark Lord, but that had not come yet. And it was here where he would have a tense run-in with Bail Organa, who was having to host Lord Vader while on his mission to find the Senator. Organa, now knowing that Vader was Anakin, anxiously jumped through several hoops to keep his wife and infant Leia far away from Vader as possible, terrified that he may be able to discern through the Force that Leia was his own. Vader had even sensed Bail's nervousness and tried to figure out what the Senator was hiding. But during this time, the two Jedi from the world, Roan Shrine, were the ones that were sent to Alderaan to extract Senator Zar, and now they were forced to break into the palace. Security footage captured the Jedi in the act, and Vader forgot all about Bail Organa for the time being, focusing in on his Jedi prey. Shrine appeared to Vader and attempted to distract him, while the rest of his crew extracted the Senator. But the Dark Lord displayed his vastly superior power, using the Force to effortlessly barehandedly parry Shrine's blaster fire. The Jedi Master attempted to flee from the Emperor's new executioner, Vader, who had chased him all the way back to their departing ship, where Senator Zar was being loaded. Back in the palace, Bail Organa ordered a full lockdown, which caused blast doors to begin shutting down, and the loading docks to shut down as well. He made sure to time it perfectly so that it would cut Vader off from the escaping Jedi. But right before the door shut, Vader managed to hurl his lightsaber through them, with the weapon finding its mark and killing Senator Zar. While he failed to capture the Jedi for a second time, Vader succeeded in at least foiling their mission. After this is another period of frustration for Vader, as Palpatine wants him to go on more diplomatic missions to spread the terror of the Empire around the galaxy. Sidious had figured that the best power play to get the people to fear him was to make Darth Vader as terrifying a figure as possible. He wanted the people to understand the great power that he, Sidious, wielded as Emperor, and to that end, he needed Vader to make a public spectacle of his power and authority. For if someone as potent as Vader answered to the Emperor, how powerful could the Emperor be? But least of all, Sidious thought that he wanted to encourage Vader to enact more fear, to taste the dark side. So while he waited to gather intel on where Master Shrine was, and where the Jedi had run off to, he dispatched Lord Vader to the world of Sereno to deal with the noble houses there. Noble houses that had supported another one of Vader's former enemies, Dooku, and the Separatist movement. Upon arriving, Lord Vader called together a meeting of all of the heads of the noble houses, as well as their firstborn sons. There, Vader branded them all as traitors for their support during the Clone Wars, and one of the counts spoke up in protest, an accusation, stating that Dooku's position made it impossible to defy him at the time because of his power. The Dark Lord, though, refused to accept his excuse, and then issued this barbaric decree. Each heir present at the meeting will assume the title of head of their house, but they must claim that by killing the current title holder. Should any of them refuse, all would die. This was a cleansing by blood. And with that, Vader ignited his lightsaber, and the clones took aim at the assembly. All of the counts of Sereno began to shout and to protest, but one of the sons, Rodas Borgin, acted first, drawing a knife and shanking his father while he wailed in despair. And then, as soon as it happened, the bloodshed began. Every firstborn son took a knife and attacked their fathers, slaughtering them in a horrific massacre as Vader watched on. Once the horror show was over though, Vader ordered them all to swear fealty to a new head of House Dooku, Count Adan Dooku, the nephew of Darth Tyrannus. Some part of me realizes that this could be Anakin taking revenge. At some point during this time, Vader also visited the planet of Hanagar. Hanagar had been a place of great interest for the Republic a year prior. During the Clone Wars, it was a neutral world, which became the site of an ecological disaster. This occurred after a battle in orbit. A Separatist command ship crashed to the surface of the world. The Republic took great interest in the accident due to the cargo of the wreckage, which had secretly been containing a secret bioweapon, and the contamination would soon spread to the rest of the planet, as it ravaged it completely. Over several months, plains and jungles died, forcing the species known as the Nagri to trek across the planet in a mass exodus, searching for a place where they could survive. Not long after arriving to the world, Vader promptly found his stormtrooper guards slaughtered around by the natives, as Vader had seen that the stormtroopers had been defeated by creatures that wielded nothing more than basic bladed weapons. Rather than wipe out the entire species though, Lord Vader was greatly impressed by their skill in battle, and wanted to make them an offer. In exchange for working with the Empire, they would restore the planet's ecosystem. The species would pay homage to Vader and would pledge to serve him as assassins, as they officially became the Death Commandos. In reality, the Imperial Restoration teams deliberately kept the world poisoned, using a type of grass that killed off the remaining plant life, thus keeping the species bound in service to the Empire and Lord Vader. The species, though, would later go on to faithfully serve Grand Admiral Thrawn in Lord Vader's name, holding up their end of the bargain. But soon the time would come when Sidious found the location of the Jedi that Vader had been hunting. Or rather, he had known all along where they were hiding, but he simply wanted to keep Vader stringing along, waiting until he knew that the Jedi were finally cornered. Using Moff Tarkin, Sidious had been tracking the Jedi ever since they departed Alderaan, and so for Vader, it was off to the Wookiee planet of Kashyyyk to annihilate the Jedi once and for all. They had found their hiding spot. At Sidious's insistence, he had spent the last few weeks sharpening his abilities to summon and to make use of his rage. In finally taking his master's instruction, Vader was now at the edge of a significant increase in power in his abilities. He had also been training in his lightsaber skill as well. Every moment that he was not doing the Emperor's bidding, he was training, practicing, drilling, doing everything that he could to get himself used to his new cybernetics. It is here when Vader starts to see an upward climb in power once again. The dark side begins to speak, to whisper, to flow through him. He begins to construct his perfect Jedi killing art, employing aspects from all forms of lightsaber combat. Vader maintained the strength of Jem-So and the kinetic aggression of a Taru, but the evolution was not complete. Learning more from the men that he had been defeated by, he adopted the footwork, the precision of Form 2 Makashi from Dooku. This caused him to be perfectly measured in his strides, as he became obsessed with surgical accuracy. Vader preferred the two-handed use of the variant of Makashi in order to keep control of his blade during duels. He had also learned from Obi-Wan Kenobi, and employed defensive sequences of Form 3 Sarisu in order to better protect his now vulnerable vital areas, such as his control panel on his chest. All of this had been done in spite of his clumsy victory on the world of Marcana. He would not allow his suit to keep him from destroying the Jedi this time. Before hunting the Jedi, Vader briefly met with Grand Moff Tarkin, and the two arranged to have the Wookiee natives captured instead of destroyed. Tarkin's scheme was to use the Wookiees as slave labor for the Death Star, but this was something that was kept pretty close to his chest and was a secret. Vader was more concerned about the Jedi at the time, and so he quickly made his way to the surface of the world where they awaited him. After taking down the first wave of a Wookiee resistance, Vader was confronted by 7 Jedi in total, all of whom rushed in to attack him, as well as his stormtrooper battalion. Among them was the Padawan Starstone, who brazenly challenged the Dark Lord. 3 of the Jedi fought off the stormtroopers, while the other 3 engaged with Lord Vader. As was the case with many Jedi Knights, they were familiar with accounts of what had happened on Geonosis when Obi-Wan and Anakin had finally confronted Dooku. Rushing in one at a time was an easy way that they would all be destroyed, and so the first 2 engaged Vader at once, learning from the mistakes of Anakin. The 2 Jedi, named Forte and Kulka, went in as a team, each of them employing a radically different lightsaber style in an effort to keep Vader off balance. Again, a trick that Obi-Wan and Anakin actually pulled off against Dooku in Revenge of the Sith. It's fascinating how Anakin too has utilized many of these techniques. Forte and Kuka, although skilled duelists, Vader was far faster than even they were now, far more agile, and complete of a duelist. He employed his power to put a quick end to the fancy twirling of his enemies. As many times as they tried to use their classical Jedi arts, they would immediately be forced back down to the ground with hurling attacks of pure fury. Vader hammering down at his opponents, hitting them with unyielding strikes. His new style was simply too practical. With the implementation of both Form 2 and Jem-So Form 5, this harshly countered the acrobatic forms like Form 4 Ataru, the most common Jedi form of the time. Time and time again, the 2 Jedi attempted to alter their style mid-combat, but Vader had an answer for every lunge, every parry, every thrust. He was crisp, unpredictable at the same time. He had learned to use his foresight to predict each one of their strategies and their maneuvers. His lightsaber blade was always somehow one step ahead of theirs until the moment that he chose to drop them. One Padawan, by the name of Classy Ano, attempted to rush to their aid, but Vader easily sidestepped her, a pathetic assault, and slashed her across the back, ending her life quickly. The Padawan had been lucky. The last two, Jambi and Nam, attempted to attack Vader from behind, but neither was even half as good as Forte or Kulak, and so they were dealt with effortlessly. The lone Padawan, Starstone, was left alone with the dealer of death, the Dark Terminator. Their fight was brief, and the Padawan quickly realized that she was simply being toyed with. Her final moments were meant to be an insult. Each motion of Vader's blade was precise, economic, not a single extra flourish or wasted movement. All the while he was goading her into using her anger. She was absolutely no match for the Dark Lord, but she was saved when Master Roan Shrine arrived just in time to challenge Vader one-on-one. This was no Padawan, no knight. This was a Jedi Master. The Jedi announced his presence by decapitating Commander Oppo and killing the rest of the clone battalion present to give his Padawan a small opportunity to escape. Vader allowed the young girl to run because Roan Shrine had been the true prize all along. However, admittedly, Vader was disappointed over Oppo's death. He had been rather fond of the commander. Facing off on the upper platforms of the Wookiee city, Vader and Roan Shrine finally crossed blades. Like the others, Shrine was astonished at Vader's sheer might, his control. His machine-like strength allowed him to keep driving forward like a juggernaut, never forcefully thrown off of his own path or his direct line. To Shrine's credit though, he managed to hit Vader on the hand, as well as get a tag on the leg. To his horror though, both times he was not met with the sizzle of flesh, but the sparking of electricity. It wasn't long before the Jedi Master understood that he was dealing with something that was beyond human. A Grievous-like amalgamation of man, of droid, but worse. This Vader could summon the power of the Force, and he also picked up why Vader protected his chest so closely. The control panel would be the key to the Jedi's victory, but getting there was going to be the hard part, of course. The Dark Lord's style was too direct, too powerful, overwhelming. It was all that the Jedi could do to simply not get battered into oblivion, hit into submission by Vader's crushing blow. But by continuously going for the chest, he was forcing the Dark Lord to adopt a more defensive form, one that left his limbs open, exactly how Roan planned. All during the duel, Roan Shrine believes that he has Vader completely figured out, that Vader was the one manipulating Palpatine behind the scenes, and that he had engineered the fall of the Republic, that he was the Dark Lord that the Jedi had searched for. Vader is actually amused by this, and withholds the truth for the moment, until it matters most. Finally, Vader resolves to stop fighting the way that Anakin did, purely with his lightsaber. Demonstrating his superiority in the Force, Vader uproots wooden planks off of the balcony that they were fighting on, flings them at his opponent. The Jedi cannot help but stand in awe of his raw power. Vader never makes a gesture when doing any of this. His hands remain still, grasping his lightsaber. Vader, fighting like an ancient dark warrior of the Sith, the way that Palpatine had always desired, assaulted the Jedi with a storm of flying planks and debris to beat him back senselessly, until he eventually fell off the platform, landing below. The Dark Lord, though, immediately jumped and joined him, landing with elegance and grace. This was the moment when we realize Vader has become accustomed to his new armor. Vader has released the inhibitions that kept him shackled, and the Jedi stood no chance. The Jedi's arm had been broken by the fall, and he had ruptured a vital organ. In his very last moments of life, Vader decided to torture the Jedi with the truth. Not only was Darth Sidious the Emperor, but that Vader was Anakin Skywalker, or that he had been. That the Dark Lord that was about to murder the Jedi had been the chosen one. For the moment, Vader's bloodlust had been appeased. It was as if he had crossed some invisible threshold to a brand new world. He could feel the power of the dark side surging through him like an icy torrent. He felt invulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with his suit, his armor, his prosthetics. They now seemed little more to him than an outfit. But even in this moment of great triumph, the dying Jedi Master had one more thing to say. The Jedi spoke of a vision that he now understood. He saw an explosion like a star, a forested planet, fleeing ships, and somehow Darth Vader at the center of it all. And with that, the Jedi died, leaving the Dark Lord puzzled, but victorious nonetheless. After this moment, fear and respect came naturally to Lord Vader from the rest of the Imperial military. He himself had allowed Anakin to completely die in his mind in this moment. He had embraced what he had done to the Jedi Order, done to the Temple, and now done to his friends and himself. The Jedi were all enemies of the Empire. They were simple, and they needed to be eradicated. Vader reveled in his power, but he craved it now more than ever. He was prepared to accept the teachings of Sidious, to become a true terror in the galaxy. But Vader also accepted that Padme was dead, and that he was now married in a sense to the dark side, to the Empire. He decided he needed no other companion than those. Tarkin had been impressed by Vader's ambition, his initiative, and Sidious was more than pleased with his progress after Kashyyyk. It was a new chapter for Darth Vader. And across the galaxy, at a little bar on Tatooine, a Jedi Master stirred. Ben Kenobi listened to a HoloNet story of a group of Jedi that had been murdered on Kashyyyk, mentioning one of the Emperor's new emissaries. Kenobi thought little of it, besides deep remorse that his Jedi brethren could not accept that the Republic was gone, and that they should go into hiding to preserve what was left of the Jedi. However, his drink would shatter on the floor, and Kenobi would find himself collapsing with it when he heard the name of the Emperor's executioner. Darth Vader lived. Vader had grown quite well into his new body and new role, but there was one thing about his past that still haunted him: his master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Vader had grown powerful in the ways of the dark side. He desired to get revenge for all of the pain that had been inflicted on Mustafar. This is where his real obsession with finding Obi-Wan begins, and instead of killing Jedi when he found them, he had them brought back to Coruscant where they were to be interrogated. One day, he was torturing and questioning a Jedi by the name of Dama Montalvo, demanding to know where Obi-Wan was. The young boy knew nothing of Kenobi, and out of anger, Vader snapped his neck like a pencil. Sidious had watched this all happen, and was disappointed that his apprentice was still obsessed over a mere Jedi, his old master specifically. He once again instructed his pupil that the Jedi were meaningless to them now, and what mattered was the Empire. But as the Emperor departed, one of Vader's clone commanders informed him that the Jedi Conclave was gathering on a world, the world of Kessel, and according to the report, Obi-Wan was to be among them. In reality, the 8 Jedi had indeed gathered on Kessel under the pretense of talking over what their next steps would be. They were divided, with a few believing that the only way to destroy the Sith was to give themselves over to the dark side and utilize its power against them. The one who led the gathering, Master Shaddai, had known that if they had all come together in one spot to meditate and debate, that nothing would ever get done. So unbeknownst to the rest of the Jedi present until the very last minute, she had leaked their gathering to Lord Vader, enticing him to come, stating that Obi-Wan would be there. She did not know that he was Anakin Skywalker though, but had heard rumors of the man that he was looking for. Darth Vader ripped into the room on Kessel, demanding to know where Obi-Wan was, as all of the Jedi ignited their lightsabers to take him down, believing that 8 against 1 would be an easy fight in their favor. The first Jedi, by the name of Saya Lan Zez, charged at Vader from behind, only to immediately be met with his blade through a stab through her chest. To add insult to injury, Vader also sliced off her weapon hand as he pulled his lightsaber from her sternum. The rest began to engage the Dark Lord, but to their shock, he was quite comfortable fending them all off, still riding the high from the world of Kashyyyk. The Dark Lord was prepared to end the lives of all of the Jedi personally. With a wave of his hand, one of the Jedi was sent flying into a rock mound, and a single upward swing of Vader's sword ends the life of the wise Jedi Master, Makais Shalas, as he carves him up the middle. The much larger Jedi, Master Jastus Far, attacks Vader from behind with a massive saber staff, and manages to even score a hit on the Dark Lord's back. With 3 more Jedi closing in as predators, Vader leaps up to the high ground on a large piece of machinery. And that's when Master Shaddai decided to engage him with her secret weapon. The Jedi had a Cortosis dagger. Instead of choosing a lightsaber, she wanted to ensure that she could kill the Dark Lord with a weapon that would disable his. Unfortunately though, this was Darth Vader, and he was not defined by his lightsaber alone. He would force pull her throat into his grasp, take her dagger before snapping her neck, ending her life quickly. Shaddai's master plan was falling into ashes, as she had just doomed herself and all of her comrades to the wrath of a Sith. Vader manages to disable the lightsabers of 3 of the Jedi, but one of them lands a hit at Vader's leg and cuts off his hand, which was wielding the dagger. Now without the weapon, Vader concedes that they were stronger than he anticipated, and Vader shockingly surrenders. This, however, was nothing more than a ploy. Vader could sense their fragile mental state and wanted to bring them down to their breaking point. The Jedi Kofi moves to strike him down, but the other Jedi, Boltar Swan, stops him, reminding him of the Jedi Code, that they do not kill an unarmed enemy that has surrendered. But Kofi, ready to give into the dark side for the sake of destroying the Sith, would take Swan's lightsaber and kills her with it, displaying a shocking moment of betrayal from the Jedi, a Jedi who believed that they would do whatever was necessary to end the Dark Lord. This provided Vader with the distraction that he needed, the mental fragility that he had sensed, as he used the Force to summon his severed arm, which was still clutching the Cortosis dagger, sending it careening straight into Kofi's chest. He takes the lightsaber for himself and prepares to move on the final 3 Jedi. But now, having seen the effects of the dark side, the 3 Jedi combined their powers and became one with the Force. They begin to assault Vader with a storm of metal, rocks, and debris, damaging his cybernetics severely. Although the Dark Lord has indeed been strong enough to annihilate many of the Jedi, he was not yet at the level of being able to dominate them outright. This would be a lesson for him in the future. But right as the Jedi prepared to finally kill Vader, a small battalion of clones arrived and opened fire on the remaining Jedi, saving Vader's life and ending the Jedi Enclave. Vader, though, was curious on how the commander knew how to find him. And of course, it turns out that Emperor Palpatine had known where he was going all along, and had ordered the troopers to intervene. Upon returning to Coruscant, Vader apologized to his master directly for disobeying him, but Sidious simply told him that his actions had proved to be useful, and that he had decided to spread a story that Vader had tracked down a nest of 50 Jedi traitors, that the Dark Lord had murdered this nest of Jedi, every last one of them himself. Vader points out that this was not true, but Sidious explains that that doesn't matter. The lie will create a legend, and will drive any surviving Jedi deep underground. They will learn fear. He then explains that Vader had allowed his anger to be used against him, rather than using it as a weapon. His fixation on Kenobi is a part of him that still belongs to Anakin Skywalker, one that must be purged. Vader says to his master that he will do as commanded, and Sidious says that they must focus on matters regarding their empire, not the Jedi. Days later, Vader was actually having some downtime. He had been standing by the Emperor's side and watching him conduct business in the Empire. Vader was always talking about how much work needed to be done, and unfortunately that work was pretty drab and boring for the Dark Lord's taste. He was awaiting a new assignment, and just wanted to get back on the front lines of the field. It was here when Vader caught wind of the very last vestiges of the Clone Wars, that they were being concluded on a world known as New Plimto. Apparently, a Jedi was present there, working alongside with what remained of the Separatist forces to fight back against the Empire, something that Palpatine found amusing. But the Dark Lord sensed Vader's restlessness and his desire to intervene, to kill the new Jedi. He told his apprentice to simply stand by, as he would have an assignment for him soon. But later that night, the Dark Lord found sleep unbearable. He was anxious to see exactly what the 2 Sith Lords were supposed to do with all of this newfound power. For the longest time, it had been about acquiring total galactic domination. But now Vader wanted to wield the power that he had been promised. Unable to find any rest, Vader decided to contact the 501st commander by the name of Veal. The clone commander was stationed on New Plimto to get an update on the situation. Veal informed the Dark Lord that the battle was over, and that the Separatist holdouts had all been destroyed with no survivors. With this, perhaps a part of Vader that is Anakin got a piece of closure. The Clone Wars was officially over. The last 3 years could be put to rest. Vader inquired about the status of the lone Jedi, to which the commander mentioned that they hadn't found the Jedi among the dead. Veal then took the opportunity to ask the Dark Lord a question which had been burning in the heart of all of the clones. Now that the war was over, was there a plan and a place for the clones in the Empire? Vader, of course, had no response. He didn't know what Palpatine planned to do with the clones once they outlived their usefulness, and he didn't want to discuss it either. He dismissively says that he's certain the Emperor has a plan, and that they can discuss it when the 501st returns to Coruscant. Commander Veal says that he's not entirely sure when they'll be returning, since they've been rerouted. Their new command was to escort their transport to deliver the women and children of the civilians of New Plimto to the slave market on the world of Orvax 4. They were to be sold for profit rather than added into the Imperial workforce. This disturbing revelation caused Vader to end the transmission abruptly, to contemplate things on the balcony of his private suite. Plagued by memories of the boyhood of Anakin, he remembered having a dream once of freeing all of the slaves. Vader would not get any sleep that night, as he stayed up contemplating the empire that he now served, that he helped create. The next morning he met with Sidious on one of the terraces to discuss a new assignment. Vader is despondent, and Sidious picks up that he is troubled by something. All Vader has to say is that he heard from Commander Veal on New Plimto. Fascinatingly, Sidious knew exactly why Vader brought this up. With no further words from his apprentice, Palpatine launches into a surprisingly well-prepared series of statements, or rather, excuses, about the Empire's policy on slavery. This is what the Dark Lord says. As I should have remembered, Anakin Skywalker was a slave, as was his mother. My apologies, Lord Vader. I should have explained the current situation sooner. The slavery that exists in the lawless reaches of the Outer Rim is wrong. The trading in individuals' lives and freedom for personal gain must end, and it will end, in time. But what the Empire is doing on New Plimto and elsewhere is different. Unrepentant separatists must be dealt with, put to work. They will make a positive contribution to the Empire, and their lives will be spared. It is a merciful alternative to what would otherwise be necessary. I'm certain you understand. Without so much as letting Vader get in a single word, Palpatine promptly walks away, leaving the Dark Lord with only his thoughts as company. It has now been 3 months since Vader woke in his new suit. Getting used to all of the Imperial life had been a deep challenge for him. The one thing that made him feel like he's actually accomplishing anything was the murdering of Jedi. His primary excuse for doing this was to rid the Empire of its greatest threat, though he likely just needed a suitable target on which to exact his revenge and rage. But now the Dark Lord comes face to face with the deeper problem of the organization of the Empire. He notices how unfairly Palpatine conducts business with systems that he once promised to aid and to help. Palpatine cares very little about the individual populaces of the galaxy, but so does Vader. Still though, nonetheless, he is stricken with confliction when he encountered the slave trade. Stepping out of universe for a moment, it's unclear whether or not Darth Vader knew where the Wookiees were going. Working with Tarkin, he was in charge of ensuring that the Wookiees were captured and rounded up instead of murdered. And he had more than likely figured out once he saw them working on the Death Star much later on the true purpose for why he had captured them. But when he went to Kashyyyk the first time, it's implied that Tarkin and Sidious went through extensive lengths to cover up the Wookiee forced labor movement, even to the point of denying that information to higher-ups in the Empire. Not even Grand Admiral Thrawn knew about this, since it wasn't directly mentioned that Vader knew where the Wookiees were being taken. We have the reason to believe that he didn't know either, as well as the fact that he had this reaction to the natives of New Plimto being sold on the slave market. We can assume that he had no knowledge of the Empire's use of slaves. It was likely that although he thought the Wookiees were being taken to prison camps, he didn't believe that they would actually be sent to work on the Death Star. But Vader could do nothing to oppose the Emperor or his rule. But now Vader was desperate to get his mind off of this, the chains of Anakin, and the only thing that made sense was the killing of more Jedi. The perfect opportunity would arise shortly after, when a little Jedi by the name of Shah Kun would contact Palpatine directly, hacking into a private channel that linked directly to his office. The Jedi was the female niece of Plo Koon, a powerful telepath. Traumatized by the Clone Wars, she had decided to remain back at the Jedi Temple, and was tasked by her uncle Plo to research the Sith in the Jedi archives. Hoping to get information on how to locate the elusive Darth Sidious, she had been there during Operation Nightfall, and had watched as Anakin murdered the librarian Jocasta Nu. Due to her fear, Shah Kun managed to escape with her life by fleeing through the secret archive passageways, as she survived in the underbelly of Coruscant. But now armed with knowledge of how the Sith Rule of Two functioned, she figured that the best way to destroy the new Dark Overlords was to infiltrate their master and apprentice dynamic. And to this end, she came to Darth Sidious pretending to have been enlightened, saying that the dark side had spoken to her, and requested to become his apprentice should she be able to kill Lord Vader. Of course, Palpatine could not resist such a delicious, entertaining prospect, and immediately conceded to her proposal. He knew very well that she had no chance of killing Vader, but he was interesting to see exactly how it would all play out. And so he dispatched the Dark Lord Vader to the place that Shah Kun had said that they should meet. In the underlevels beneath the Jedi Temple, Vader had been sent to kill Shah Kun. As soon as he arrived, he announced that he was fully aware of her plot, and that she was fooling no one. But the Jedi had her own trick. She attacked the Dark Lord with a group of Kythons that she had mind-controlled through the Force. The Kythons were native to the underlevels of Coruscant, and were extremely dangerous, with the Jedi using her telepathy to dominate them. But Vader shredded through every one of them with his lightsaber. Shah had one more trap planned for the Dark Lord, and tried to anchor him down with an electro net. It stunned Vader for maybe a mere moment, before he tore through that with the Force as well. Shah could see that he was far more powerful than she was, even for all of her traps, and so, the young Jedi drew her lightsaber, and began the fight. To her credit, Shah Kun was quite skilled. Empowered by her intent to avenge the Jedi, she fought valiantly during their brief exchange, even managing to jump over Vader's head and slash him across the back. But the Dark Lord gained the upper hand by proving his superiority in the Force, pushing her into rubble and battering her defenses away with a series of hammering strikes. Soon, he lifted her in the air by her throat, and used the Force to fling her body directly into his lightsaber. In her final moments, she was at first worried that the light would die within her, but she had a flash of images showing the future. She saw Luke Skywalker, his rebel friends mounting a resistance against the Empire. She then saw Luke fighting Vader on the Death Star, Anakin redeeming himself and betraying Palpatine. Knowing that she was not the last hope of the galaxy, Shah Kun died blissfully and successfully passed on through the Force. Interestingly, this is the second time one of Vader's kills foresees his redemption in their final moments. It was as if the Force itself was soothing all of those who knew Vader's identity, and letting them all know that the Chosen One was not truly dead. Vader, however, felt her die in peace, and was deeply disturbed by this. So disturbed, in fact, that he reported it back to his master. Palpatine contemplated the puzzle, wondering as to what she had seen. Ultimately, though, he would dismiss it, stating that the only vision that would come to pass was his own. But now Vader's mission had arrived. He was to oversee the construction of the AT-AT facility on the world of Otavon 12. Issues were now plaguing the factory, which was called Tremor Base, and a strong leader was needed. The problems were that the Wookiee workers were resistant to the foreman, and the native Ovani people were constantly attacking the walled Imperial facility. But while Vader was there, he got the Wookiee workers in line, defended Tremor Base by leaping into a group of the attackers, killing all of them himself, forcing a full-blown retreat. Vader was keen on discovering who the Ovani leaders were, due to the fact that he felt a strong presence on the planet, and he felt that the Jedi were among them. To this end, he sent out a scout squad, but shortly he would lose contact with them. He reported all of this in a holographic meeting with Palpatine, but the Emperor sharply reprimanded his apprentice, reminding him that he was not there to chase Jedi or to fight the local populace, but to keep the AT-AT construction on schedule. Vader complained that it was poor use of his abilities and power, but Palpatine told him that his obsession with the Jedi had clouded his judgment, made him forget his place. He issued a warning that Vader was to remain at Tremor Base until the walkers were complete, or he would never be allowed to leave there. And so, in pure Vader fashion, as soon as he signed off with the Emperor, he immediately left the base, taking with him a probe droid to go find the Ovani Jedi leader. Despite the protests of the base's captain, Vader was undeterred, especially when he saw the last member of his scout squad stumble out of the forest and die at his feet, as the trooper informed him that they had indeed seen a Jedi. The Sith Lord then encountered one of the Ovani camps after trekking through the jungle, and faced down a hooded Jedi who was seated among them. The clash of lightsabers barely lasted a single exchange, as Vader immediately dropped the young boy, and exposed him as a mere Padawan learner. Following a brutal interrogation, the Padawan revealed that his master was heading to a starship to leave the world. Vader would then take the young Jedi's lightsaber and used it in tandem with his own to murder the boy. At this point, the base commander contacted him and frantically asked him to come back, as the Wookiees were not obeying his command. Vader simply told him to crack down on them, not to bother him again while he was on his mission, once again blatantly ignoring his duties at the facility and the orders of his master. The native Ovani people then ambushed Vader with blasters, but their real plan was firing a sonic sound device into the ground. The sound waves emitted summoned a giant monster from the water, known as the Sugati. Its incredibly thick hide was lightsaber resistant, and it nearly ate Vader whole. But luckily its mind was susceptible to Force persuasion, and so Vader dominated the creature, forcing it to take him to the Jedi Master. Upon arriving to the cliff where Master Hylon was meditating, the Jedi had been expecting Vader's arrival, as the Jedi Master revealed that he was not trying to escape the world at all, and at that moment, the Sugati turned around and left Darth Vader, as the Jedi Master Hylon stood and attacked the Dark Lord with his lightsaber. Utilizing both a lightsaber and a walking stick, the Jedi engaged Vader in a fierce duel. He managed to hit Vader in the side with his stick, but the strike clanked uselessly against his armor. With a flick of his wrist, Vader performed a perfect Sun Gem, a move which accurately slices apart an enemy's weapon. Even Hylon complimented Darth Vader's precision, though the Dark Lord admitted that he had been aiming for the Jedi's arm. That was when the Jedi Master revealed that his cane had housed a secret metal blade, which he used to disarm Vader in a surprise maneuver. But as clever as this trickster Jedi was, he did not account for the fact that Vader also had a hidden blade, one that belonged to his Padawan, as Vader stabbed the Jedi Master with his Padawan's own weapon. As Master Hylon lay dying from his sudden injury, Vader demanded to know why he refused to run, why he didn't escape, and the Jedi simply told him this. He told him to go back and to find out. Upon returning to the base, Vader found it completely in ruin. There was nothing left but rubble and bodies, wrecked AT-AT walkers, and amidst it all was another sonic sound device, revealing where the Sagati had ran to. The entire thing had been employed by the Jedi to lure Vader away from the base, and to kill him somewhere else while they wrecked the Imperial facility. They failed in killing the Sith, but succeeded in their ultimate mission. At that moment, Vader turned around to see that Palpatine had arrived personally, apparently in response to knowing that Vader had disobeyed him. He then told his apprentice to meditate on his failure, as he got into his shuttle and flew away, abandoning his apprentice in the ruins of Tremor Base. Once again, Vader's obsession with Jedi had come back to haunt him. On Kessel, Palpatine had turned his disciples' disobedience into profit, spreading a story about his success in order to inspire fear. But now that same disobedience had cost them a great deal of time, resources, and setbacks. So much of the Empire's material was being put towards the Death Star, so anything left for things like walkers and the Navy had to be tightly budgeted, and now much of that was obliterated. But since Vader was already obsessed with killing the Jedi, Palpatine thought it best to at least indulge him every now and then, so that it wouldn't cause problems later. He simply knew that this was something that he could not break Vader free of. And to this end, he dispatched the Dark Lord with the 501st to the world of Vaclin to put down a Jedi-backed insurgency. Vader finally got the go-ahead from his master. On Vaclin, there had been 3 Jedi who were leading a resistance force. Vader had killed the Jedi Master and captured his Jedi Padawan. However, a single knight remained, a man by the name of Chona Bene, who was giving the Empire headaches because of his slipperiness and clever tactics. He was a smart-mouthed Jedi, and worst of all, he was embarrassing Darth Vader's patrols. The first time Vader encountered him, his plan was for the insurgents to focus sniper fire from a mountain holdout on Vader specifically, to target and take out the Dark Lord. While Vader was contained, the Jedi would rush out and commenced a rapid elimination of soft targets, such as the stormtroopers and the hover tanks. Chona himself was a Maynarish Jedi Knight. His species had 4 arms, and he was incredibly limber and agile. He was also a great tactician and fighter, and preferred to wield 3 blue lightsabers at once. By the time Vader managed to free himself from the barrage of blaster fire, the Jedi had escaped deep into the caverns. The Dark Lord was frustrated, but was not foolish, and decided not to pursue his quarry into another trap. So he recalled his forces, and decided to end the hunt for the day. But the problems didn't end here. The Empire was having a massive problem keeping control of the world of Vaclin. This was one of the few worlds that had been extremely pro-Jedi during the war. The Jedi had always helped out their planet and recruited from their people time and time again. They named parks and towns after notable Jedi Masters. They built statues of them, and even had holidays associated with the Jedi lore. Life on Vaklan was hard, and so anytime it was possible to get their children off of the planet, they readily shoved them at the Jedi. So unsurprisingly, they weren't too keen on Palpatine's new order to eliminate them. Many of them secretly supported the Jedi Chona and helped keep him out of Imperial sight. He had the backings of an entire city, maybe even a planet. Not only this, but their insurgency was gaining recruits every single day, making it nearly impossible to squash any resistance. This was one of the first few rebel factions. Because of this, Vader knew that he needed to end the life of this lone Jedi fast before the rebellion would outgrow his influence. He would go on to interrogate and capture a young Jedi Padawan, promising the young Force wielder a painless death or a painful one depending on his level of cooperation. Vader only began getting answers when he used the Force to squeeze the Padawan's heart inside of his own chest. But as soon as he was told exactly where Chona was hiding, the Imperial base was bombed by insurgents seeking to rescue the captured Padawan. Their attack failed, as they met Lord Vader face to face. During the fighting though, the Jedi Padawan attempted to escape and attack the Dark Lord of the Sith. Of course though, the Jedi would meet a swift end. Meeting with Palpatine, Vader proposed that if they put the Jedi Knight down, this would not end the rebellion, and perhaps an orbital bombardment on the entire planet, or perhaps the most populated city, would stop it. However, Palpatine told Vader that they needed Vaklan's resources, and could not afford another dire loss, especially after the Imperial facility. Not to mention, it was a delicate time in the young Empire, and they didn't have the ability yet to rule on fear alone. With one last spiteful message, Palpatine told Vader that if he could not think like a ruler instead of a soldier, then he would need to be replaced, put somewhere else. Darth Vader was meant to be a ruler, but still, all he wanted was blood. Once again, Vader encounters one of the biggest issues of his new life, actually having to act like someone with real power, a position he had never been in before. Vader had never ruled. This forces Darth Vader to think outside of the box on how he will crush the insurrection. And as a result, he gets advice from an ISB agent, one that figures out why the people support the Jedi so feverishly. Then, he puts his master plan into play. Vader orders an important spiritual site filled with Jedi statues on the planet to be destroyed publicly. It is in this place where it was constructed an Imperial education center, and all the children of the world were encouraged to enroll to be educated in the doctrine of a new empire. They even offered opportunities for off-world graduates. Vader also targeted the location known as the Northward Park, which was planted from the cuttings of the Neti Jedi Master Uru-Ku, who was completely burned down by Vader's order, with the security station put in its place. He then targeted a place known as the Backways, an alley that was still scorched and broken from where Ki-Adi-Mundi had fought infiltrators during the Clone Wars. The people allowed it to remain in disrepair to remember his valiant stand for their people, and the Empire cleaned it and rebuilt it instead. Even citizens who were named after Jedi were forced to change their name to something that was approved by the Empire. This wasn't just a purge of Jedi lives, it was a total erasure of Jedi memory from their very hearts, minds, and culture. One of the most sinister acts that Lord Vader ever committed, but something that was true, is Darth Vader was now certainly thinking like a Sith ruler. After all, the Jedi had done the exact same thing to the Sith memory thousands of years ago. This was just payback. All while this was occurring, Vader attempted to search the world and the Jedi ruins for the Jedi Master who had eluded him for so long. He continued to desecrate their memory in the temple until he finally broke and ordered an orbital bombardment to flush the Jedi out. Once the bombardment had occurred, the Jedi climbed his way from the ruins and faced down Lord Vader one-on-one, ready to destroy the Dark Lord for all that he had done. After a quick exchange of the lightsaber, Vader disarmed the four-armed Jedi with a blast of Force energy. Chona Benet quickly escaped into the caverns yet again, bringing Darth Vader in full pursuit. He led the Dark Lord into a gas pocket in the cave, which was highly flammable, a trap. This was to get Vader to extinguish his lightsaber, to put them on even ground one more time. All the while, the Jedi continued to insult Lord Vader, tell him that the Jedi would never die in the hearts of the people so long as their stories persisted, and so long as Vader would continue to hunt them. He proved that the memory would never die. Their battle comes down to a fistfight, as well as a display of telekinetic abilities, but in both of these areas, Darth Vader is vastly superior. Not to mention the gas pocket was incredibly toxic to organic beings, so the Jedi himself was not going to last long anyway. Vader knocked the Jedi down after nearly beating him to death, and was poised to murder him then and there. But then came a dark realization. The people needed to see this Jedi die. They needed to see the power of the Empire, and that it was in their best interest to obey a new regime. So he let the Jedi go, allowed him to run the streets of the city filled with fear. Still poisoned, delirious, the Jedi found one of his sympathizers and attempted to get help. Dozens of the citizens surrounded him, watching their hero look like an utter defeated mess. But then, all of a sudden, one of the clone troopers shot the Jedi through the chest, believing that he was a drunk, harassing the rest of the normal citizens. Lord Vader's plan had worked marvelously. The civilians had had their hero publicly humiliated, executed in front of them like an animal, and instead of an urban legend and stories, they would look back at this Jedi with shame and embarrassment. The insurgency dropped to an all-time low, as the Empire put in place communication sensors to stamp out all rebellious talk. And so, the Jedi purge of Vaklan was complete, and Vader left. Later, Vader would report all of this to his master, along with the promise to do exactly what he did on Vaklan to every single planet that belonged to the Empire. Sidious praised his apprentice for finally learning, growing out of his passion for petty Jedi hunts. And while this would be one of the last times in Legends that Vader is beset on hunting a group of Jedi, his obsession with them would continue, as it is revealed that he kept a small lightsaber collection from many of his previous kills. The Emperor's emissary has already done quite a lot in his first few months as Lord Vader, and his adventures running into Jedi certainly do not end here. There would be yet another, and he would run into them nearly a year later. But this Jedi was from an older time, not from the Order of the Clone Wars, but the Order of the Old Republic. It wasn't very long after the events of Vaklan that Vader was ready to assume his search and a way to overthrow Palpatine. A brand new mission had taken his view. His suit had been designed to be susceptible to electrical currents, making him far more vulnerable to Sidious's finest weapon, Sith lightning. Not to mention, Vader was made keenly aware by his now current power alone, and the fact that it would not be enough to overthrow Sidious. To this end, the Dark Lord began looking for a way to either increase his abilities so as to eclipse that of Palpatine's, or another option, acquire a suitable apprentice. His search led him to finding the trail of the elusive Myrrh Talisman. The ancient Sith artifact was from the creation of one of the very first dynasties of Sith Lords. Karnus Myrrh had been its creator, one of the original 12 Dark Jedi that established the first Sith Empire. The talisman that he created could not only increase one's power in the Force, but it gave them the ability to transform any non-Force sensitive they wished into a mutant known as a Rakghoul, to control them like an army. Vader had interrogated a smuggler by the name of Jenks, and he had learned of a mysterious crate on his ship. He then contacted Fane Tuturi, a well-known historian, and set a trap for the crew. Vader ambushed the group on a remote moon and discovered that the crate in their possession was none other than Drapa's oubliette, an artifact believed to contain the Myrrh Talisman and the Jedi who wore it. 4,000 years earlier in the timeline, a Jedi Shadow by the name of Celeste Morn had sacrificed herself to wear the Myrrh Talisman so that it would not possess anybody else. She was then placed in stasis by fellow Jedi until they could figure out a cure for the Myrrh Talisman. Unfortunately, of course, they never did. And Celeste was left in the oubliette and was passed around the galaxy until now it had found Vader. Against the wishes of the historian, Vader opened the casket and awoke the Jedi. When she came out of her sleep, the spirit of Karnus Myrrh was still left deep within her mind, as she frantically questioned the historian who was nearby, and learned that not only had she been asleep for 4,000 years, but that the Republic had fallen to the Sith. Out of anger, she turned and attacked Lord Vader. The Dark Lord went on the defensive and said that he didn't wish to harm her. In truth, Vader was fascinated by the ancient Jedi. He sensed great power within her and wanted to take her as his apprentice. Already she was consumed by anger and desperation. She needed only to give in to those feelings, and she could embrace true power. As a Jedi of the Old Republic, Vader would quickly learn that he was dealing with something different. She was on an entirely different level than any Clone Wars survivor. She was a true warrior. When the clone had opened fire on her, she simply dispatched them with little thought, and then advanced towards Darth Vader like a Terminator. She continued to savagely attack him, but the Dark Lord remained on the defense, offering her a chance to rule the galaxy at his side. But Celeste, although filled with rage, was still a Jedi and only wanted to wipe the Sith from the galaxy. As the two were fighting, the spirit of Carnus Mur appeared and began to goad Celeste into either giving into the dark side or to allow herself to die so that Vader could claim the talisman. He wanted to possess a suitably powerful host so that he could make his grand return. Distracted by Mur's taunting, the Jedi left herself open for attack, and Vader used the Force to fling her into a wall. The battle begins to turn against the Old Republic Jedi, as Vader proves to be far stronger than she was in this moment. With both Vader and Mur telling her to give up and embrace the dark, the Jedi was unbalanced, which caused her to be disarmed. And Vader then gives the ultimatum: you will surrender or you will die. With her back literally against the wall, the Jedi is faced with an impossible choice. She could foresee the hell that Vader would rain across the galaxy if he got his hands on the talisman. At the same time, Carnus Mur begins to hiss in Vader's ear through the Force, telling him how powerful the artifact would make him if he killed her, and claimed it as his own. Vader even saw a vision of him killing Sidious with it. However, Vader is much wiser than that. He knew that by embracing the power of the talisman to achieve his goals, he would merely be trading in one master for another. He would only be enslaved to Carnus Mur instead of Palpatine. This was all stopped, however, when the historian begged Darth Vader to flee. The Dark Lord grabbed him and dragged him back, exposing him for being an agent of Sidious secretly. Palpatine could sense Vader's desire to overthrow him, and so he had put this doctor in his path to not only give him information, but to spy on him as well. However, Vader had simply used the doctor, but seen his master's hand in everything, and that's when the Jedi Celeste decided to finally use the true power of the talisman. Vader was too dangerous. She turned the historian and all of the troopers into Rakghouls, and under her command, the monster swarmed Vader, forcing him to retreat off of the moon in a rare failure. Finding his perfect apprentice would need to wait, at least until Darth Vader could find a better way to hide them from his new master. This trip was important because Vader realized he was not yet ready. 3 weeks would pass, and Darth Vader would return to Coruscant. And with the death of the historian, this had all been concealed from his master, which was successful. There were no witnesses save for the Jedi Celeste Morn, who was still currently stranded on the moon. Vader had decided to use the last several weeks to review the stormtrooper regiments across the galaxy, establishing a plausible reason for his absence. During their meeting, however, Palpatine had assumed his apprentice was chasing rumors about the Jedi. One Jedi by the name of Das Genir, who had once been a part of the crew that had taken Celeste in the Oubliette. Vader had not known any of this, and it had come to a shock to him that none of the reports had floated his way. He played it off, however, while his master once again assured him that he needed not be concerned with all of the Jedi who were scattered and divided. He explained that he had already set in motion a plan to deal with them. He wondered if the plan included himself, though. But after Sidious sent Vader to Bandamir to deal with something new, he figured that the plan that Sidious was speaking of did not involve his apprentice. On Bandamir, the mining crews were refusing to honor their contracts with the Empire, and while Vader dutifully fought and suppressed their pathetic insurgency along with the 501st, his mind was admittedly elsewhere. Why would his master tell him that he had a plan for dealing with the surviving Jedi, and then keep the details away from him? Along with all of this, why would Sidious name drop Das Genir? Vader continued to contemplate and to think, attempting to unravel Palpatine's machinations. But the only thing he knew was that his master's eyes would always be on him, ever watching. After the Battle of Bandamir concluded, Vader met with Commander Veal again on a cliffside in order to assess what had happened and to be given a post-conflict report. However, the Dark Lord had another conversation in mind. He mentioned to the trooper that the Emperor foresaw the Jedi would attempt to thwart his move to consolidate the Republic into the Empire, and that Palpatine had prepared all of the clone troopers by indoctrinating them with Order 66. Vader then asked Veal directly if they'd ever been indoctrinated with a similar order, one designed to attack him if the Emperor ever commanded it. The commander stammered out an answer, stating that if such an order did ever exist, that he did not have the authority to divulge that information. But his sad answer was as good as a confirmation to Vader as he needed. So with a quick motion, he used the Force to grab Commander Veal by the throat, and to hurl him off of the cliff to his death. Vader knew now indefinitely that he would need to keep an eye over his shoulder at his master, but he wasn't going to allow Sidious to carry out some plan to get rid of the Jedi without his involvement. And this begins with Vader following the only lead that he has, the the former Jedi, Das Janir. Vader had planned to interrogate Jenks again, the same man who had told him about the oubliette and the crew. However, someone made it there before he did, an assassin by the name of Falco Sang. The assassin had been sent there to kill the former Jedi due to the Jedi's involvement in taking down a previous crime syndicate. He had interrogated and killed Jenks before he made it there, and escaped the Imperial prison before he could be caught by Lord Vader. When Palpatine found out about this, he launched at Vader into another rage, reprimanded him about his obsession with the Jedi, but he stopped when Vader told him about this assassin. Sidious didn't want an uncontrolled third party interfering with their plans, so he tasked Lord Vader with hunting down both the assassin and the Jedi, but made sure to insist that the assassin was Vader's primary target, and that he not get distracted. When Lord Vader arrived on the desert world, he saw that the assassin had already seemingly taken out the Jedi, who was nowhere to be found. But as he would soon come to learn, this would be one of the few Jedi to give Vader the permanent slip. He had not been killed, and the two would never meet, but he would not be so easily deterred. He took the assassin Falco Sang back to Coruscant and trained him there for the sole purpose of hunting down and killing this single Jedi. Vader knew that with his help, he could train the assassin to murder the Jedi when he did not have time or resources to escape his master. Around this time, something else interesting starts to happen with Lord Vader. He comes to a deep realization that he hasn't quite destroyed what was left of Anakin Skywalker. He still had painful memories that remained that racked him with immense guilt. And soon, these came to manifest as visions of a perfect life, one that Darth Vader could have had he not embraced the dark side. In this fantasy, he had not betrayed Windu, and instead helped him destroy Palpatine. The resulting aftermath saw him becoming head of the Jedi Council, living a perfect life with Padme, who gave birth to a son. At this time, Vader had no idea that there were twins out there that were his, and he only thought that Padme had one child. In this vision, Vader actually named his son Jyn Skywalker in honor of Qui-Gon, and Padme also became the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. The two of them achieved their goals of galactic peace. These fantasies would assail Vader during the moments of rest that he could find, as when he was sleeping, or when he was getting a painful routine maintenance on his suit or his prosthetics. This is when the visions came. It was directly after one of these maintenance sessions that Vader was called to have an audience with the Emperor, where a new mission awaited him. Grand Moff Tarkin's son, Admiral Tarkin, had recently gone missing in the Atoan system, which lay in the largely unexplored area of space known as the Ghost Nebula. Tarkin expressed his misgivings about having Vader spearhead this operation, considering how the Dark Lord had previously failed on several missions. Palpatine was also done with Vader's repeated disobedience in regard to the Jedi and hunting them, so in an effort to assure Vader would not get sidetracked, he would be shadowed by Captain Shale. Vader spurned the idea of being watched by an Imperial, but he could do nothing to dissuade or change his master's mind. With the 501st in tow, Vader would arrive on Atoa and attack their fortress city, hoping to capture their high command and interrogate them about the disappearance of the Admiral Tarkin. Lord Vader and his forces cut their way through the city, shredding apart all resistance that they encountered. The battle was quickly won, with the Dark Lord utilizing the Force to cause an avalanche, one that blinded all enemy snipers. Captain Shale proved himself to be a worthy fighter as well, as he worked alongside Vader to take out the gunner nest, as well as the commanding officers of the Atoan city. Vader interrogated the soldiers that remained, holding them captive next to a freezing river, but the only thing that any of them would say were laments about the death of their people. Finished with their defiance, Lord Vader ordered that they all be drowned, for the city to be burned, and everyone old enough to hold a weapon to be executed. But that was when a strange priestess arrived by the name of Lady Sero, as she rowed her way towards the dock and the Imperials on a boat and offered them her help. Aboard the Star Destroyer, Vader had several of the Atoan people dissected, since they were a new species yet to be discovered. It's there where Lady Sero explains that in exchange for Vader's help in making her the Queen of the Ghost Nebula, that she will help him navigate this area of space, and to find the younger Tarkin. Vader acquiesces only after making certain that she will be loyal only to the Emperor. She leads them to the wreckage of the Star Destroyer of Tarkin, which is floating deep in space. Vader, in his black Actis-class starship, and a few clones and V-Wings inspect the wreckage and find evidence of sabotage. They are then attacked by more Atoans, who they see has their own fleet of starfighters. Vader and his clone troopers clean the house with them, and Vader, still being the best pilot in the galaxy, manages to force one of the rebel pilots into the Star Destroyer's hangar. Interrogating the pilots reveals the next planet of their destination. But during the interrogation, Vader has an epiphany. When he reports to the Emperor later, he proposes to his master, instead of retrieving Tarkin, that they should kill him and blame it on the insurgents. Vader says that the loss of his son will fill Wilhuff Tarkin with hatred, make him even more dangerous than ever before, a virtue of his that Palpatine already greatly admires. Sidious is pleased by this plan and permits Vader to carry it out and to kill the younger Tarkin. Their next destination is a planet whose massive oceans are comprised entirely of flammable tar. Vader and the clone Shadow Commandos perform a stealth operation in order to capture a floating Atoan city where they believe Tarkin is being held captive. However, something very strange begins to happen. Whenever Vader finds the Admiral's cell, the only person there is a protocol droid. The droid will only repeat that he has a present from the younger Tarkin that he is to deliver to anyone that can find him. It turns out to be a bomb, and Vader of course survives, but it causes damage to his chest plate. Finishing the mission, Vader goes on to interrogate the Atoan leaders of the floating facility. Captain Shale watches Darth Vader as he brutally speaks and uses his interrogation tactics as he repeatedly hurls Atoan soldiers off the side of the ship into the burning tar below in order to get answers out of their superior officers. When one finally breaks, her answer reveals evidence that Tarkin may indeed be an Imperial traitor. It seems Vader's resolve to eliminate the junior Tarkin will actually be in the Empire's best interest here. However, the treachery is not done yet. That night, after another dream about Padme, Vader is awoken in his room to find he is surrounded by clone Shadow Commandos. Captain Shale is there as well, saying that they believe that Vader is going to kill the younger Tarkin, and has ordered him to be executed while he runs to save the Admiral and return to Palpatine as a hero, betraying the Dark Lord for glory. But this is a Dark Lord of the Sith. Vader makes quick work of his would-be executioners, cutting each of them down and even turning their own blasters against them, all without his helmet on. Once he meets with the 501st Troopers, they join Vader's side and effortlessly gun down all of Shale's men, as the commander informs Lord Vader of the mutiny. The Sith Lord and his remaining squad members make it to the hangar before the ship begins to explode, sabotaged just as Tarkin's ship had been. Not only this, but Lady Shero was now missing as well, the old priestess, leaving Vader and his men to only narrowly escape the shuttle, leaving them to crash land on the world below. Vader and the 501st then follow the trail of Captain Shale, which leads them directly of what remained of his Shadow Trooper squad, all of whom have now been executed. It's then when the 501st is ambushed by more soldiers, rebels again, and to Vader's shock, the rebels are being led by the younger Tarkin, who massacres what remains of Vader's 501st. But the Dark Lord will not surrender, and murders at least a dozen of the rebels with his blade. But Tarkin is ready, and it is revealed that many of the rebels have flamethrowers. Vader likely would have been able to take them all out, but his chest plate hadn't been fully repaired from the previous explosion, which caused him to get flamed into submission momentarily. Lady Shero then makes her own traitorous appearance, and shoots Vader with a stun blaster. The Dark Lord then awakens in a mysterious location. His helmet has been removed, and a rebreather mask has been affixed to his face. Tarkin explains that he defected to join the Atoans after the grief that he felt for causing genocide to their people. Lady Shero had forgiven him, offered him a chance at redemption by her side if he helped her gain control over the Ghost Nebula. Apparently by this point, the two were now lovers, and the Admiral had planned on trying to turn Vader over to their cause, to convince him to betray his master and become a rebel. But as soon as they leave, Vader is visited by a spectral vision of Padme. She coos over him softly, commenting on how broken and destroyed he now looks. In his weakened and vulnerable state, Vader responds to his vision as if she were there really, mentioning that he was what the Masters have made him. Padme calls him Anakin, and says that self-pity does not suit him. But Vader lashes out, commands her not to speak that name again. Anakin Skywalker had died with her. He had been completely destroyed. Turning away her head in shame, she then says that if that is true, then there is no one left here for her. The ghost of Padme begins to leave in the light from which she had originated, as Vader begins to shout for her to return, to come back. Now giving over his broken state of mind, his rage begins to fester, and it empowers him, causing him to rise up, to snap the binds which now held him, desperate to go chase his lost wife. The maskless Vader then madly bursts through the walls of the hidden underground temple that he has been restrained in, shattering his way into a ceremony room where Lady Shero, Tarkin, and Captain Shale were all speaking. Shale quickly attempts to cover Shero and the Admiral, trying to stop Lord Vader with his own lightsaber. But this man was not dealing with a normal Vader. Vader is not in his right mind here. He is maddened, in rage. He believes that they are keeping his wife away from him. Shale attempts to swing at Vader with his own lightsaber, only for his hand to be caught mid-air. As the Dark Lord demands to know where Padme is, he repeatedly bludgeons Shale in the face with his metal hand, before pressing his thumbs deep into his eye sockets. As Shale lies there bleeding out, he explains that he only betrayed the Empire because he wanted to serve Tarkin, who he said was a good man unlike Palpatine, who had made them all slaves. He then reveals that he has bombs strapped beneath his chest, rigged to explode so that he could sacrifice himself and to take out Lord Vader as well. Meanwhile, Shero and Tarkin are making their escape through the catacombs of the strange temple. They hear the bomb go off, but the priestess knows that Darth Vader will not be stopped that easily, that the power of the dark side will sustain him. And she is right. Still enraged, feeding off of despair and regret, Vader is ignoring the fact that he is still without his helmet, trudging his way through the labyrinthian catacombs to find his prey. But that is when he runs into his final encounter with the vision of Padme. She told him that she never truly ever left him, but Vader told her that she didn't leave, she died. Padme then takes off her hood to reveal her face being old, wrinkled like a corpse. She tells him that she didn't just die, that he killed her, that it was his fault. Kneeling before the Phantom, Vader admits that he did kill her, just as he killed Anakin and their child. And then he reveals that he hates himself for everything that he has done. But then, the spirit of Padme addresses him as Lord Vader and tells him that she forgives him, vanishing from sight. Lady Shero appeared behind Vader, revealing the fact that the visions of his dead wife had been behind her all along. She had been putting those images in his head in order to offer him a gift of closure, perhaps as a way of changing his mind from the darkness and joining them. But she clearly did not know the broken mind that she had been toying with. Vader was beyond reason. He insisted that she bring Padme back from the dead, or else he would kill Tarkin, demanding if she did not, that he would break his neck. Shero begs the Sith not to kill Tarkin, stating that she was now pregnant with their child. She also said that she could heal his mind, his scars, that they would only now be physical. Vader then releases Tarkin as he comes back to his right mind. No longer lost to madness, he decides to use his power to bring down the entire temple, to kill the three of them. The Dark Lord rips through the Force, bringing the temple down around them as it completely collapses. Days pass, as the Dark Lord awakens back in an Imperial laboratory being rebuilt by medical droids, his master standing at his side. Shocked that he was still alive, Sidious asked how he managed to survive being buried for days. And all Vader said is that the dark side gave him all that he needed. With all the burning pain and hatred he received from those visions of Padme, it allowed Vader to draw upon the dark side to keep himself alive for this long, refusing to succumb to death without his mask. Palpatine was genuinely impressed and said that Vader had done well. The traitors were dealt with, the insurgents were crushed, and an entire new system had now been conquered. With the son of Grand Moff Tarkin dead, he was now more vicious and resolute than ever. As Vader receives his helmet once more, he kneels before his master and asks for his bidding. Vader now ready for his next task. In the following weeks, a graduation ceremony would be held on Coruscant for the first class of the galaxy's Imperial military academies. Cadets from all 7 schools converged on Coruscant to be reviewed by Emperor Palpatine directly. Among these cadets was the valedictorian by the name of Lurita Tom. who was disabled due to an accident that had occurred early in his life that left him without his left arm and had a horribly scarred face. Vader and the Emperor would attend the graduation, where the headmaster Gentis, a Clone Wars war hero, gave the graduation speech and awarded the title of lieutenant to the valedictorian. However, later that night during the celebrations, the cadet's friends locked him inside and sabotaged his starfighter. The valedictorian escaped their trickery just as a terrorist attack was unleashed on the Imperial Palace. In the explosions that followed, most of the clone troopers on the station were killed, leaving only a few of them with Vader left to defend the ensuing attack from the masked terrorists. The lieutenant had made it to ground zero alongside Vader to fight by him until he discovered who was behind the betrayal. It turned out that Headmaster Gentis had secretly planned an uprising against Palpatine and had involved all of the cadets from the academies in his plot to ultimately kill the Emperor and take his place. As you can see, the early days of the Empire were wrought with infighting and betrayal. Even Palpatine was not immune. The new Lieutenant Tom had listened to one of his injured friends and explained that Gentis knew that the Emperor would be throwing the young cadets to their deaths in the service of the greater Empire, and that he had attempted to stop all of these cadets from going to their death. As Vader murdered the last insurgent in the plaza though, he turned to watch Tom, and he listened to the conversation intently. The injured cadet explained to Tom that it would not be worth it. He draws too much attention to himself, but that he could stand with them now. That they couldn't tell him earlier. It was too much of a risk. However, the lieutenant was now loyal only to the Empire, and he explained this much to his dying friend. Then he stood and faced Lord Vader. The Dark Lord recognized Tom as the valedictorian, but the lieutenant knelt before the Dark Lord and said that the honor meant nothing to him. He was now loyal only to Vader and the Emperor. Pleased, Vader invited him to follow him. Despite his disability, the young cadet was continuously determined to reach new heights in the Empire. He had dreamt of one day becoming an admiral or even a Grand Moff, but now he had abandoned all of that. There was now more to his dream. His only desire was to prove that he was worthy to the only person that mattered, to Darth Vader. Meanwhile, the Imperial Palace was bombed with a deadly gas known as the Aorth-6, a biologically engineered necrotic virus which literally melt victims from the inside out once it was inhaled. Gentis was pulling out all of the stops to ensure that the Emperor died there, when Vader instructed Tom to don a breather mask and to follow him deep into the fray. Nearly every person inside the Imperial Palace was now dead, royal guards included, besides Palpatine himself and one other, a Moff by the name of Moff Trokta, who was also able to wear a breather mask due to a health condition. The Emperor was in terrible condition though, bleeding from his face, and he was only able to keep the effects from the gas from killing him through using the dark side and intense focus. The four men moved the Emperor down the secret hangar of the palace, where an advanced stealth transport was housed, waiting to whisk him away. The ship in question appears to be modeled after Darth Maul's Scimitar, the most elite stealth starship that was ever created in Star Wars lore in the prequel era. They all get Palpatine to the medical bay within the ship, and placed him in a stasis chamber in order to slow down the progress of the virus. However, they needed to get him to a secure location with medical facilities before Gentis and his men discovered the location of the secret hangar. Moff Trokta suggested taking Palpatine to a different system, but Tom hopefully pointed out that they didn't know how deeply Gentis' corruption ran, so for the time being, no Imperial world was safe. But Vader knew of a secret location that no one would find the Emperor, which leads himself and Tom to searching the now abandoned and off-limits Jedi Temple. But while they were gone, Gentis' engineers sent out a command to every droid within 5 kilometers of the Imperial Palace to murder all Imperials. This caused the medical droid attending to Palpatine to attack the Moff, and at the same time, the simulacrum droids in the Jedi Temple activated as well, and went over to attack Vader and Tom with training lightsabers. Vader, of course, was more than a match for mere droids meant to train young Jedi, and with just a few slashes of his blade and a burst of immense force power, he turned all of them to scrap metal. Back to Moff Trokta inside the stealth ship though, he was fighting off the medical droids, smashing them to pieces with his prosthetic fists. Finally, when Vader reaches the High Council chambers, he warns the young Tom not to tell anyone what he is about to see in here tonight, and Vader plays a holographic recording of Anakin Skywalker speaking to the Jedi High Council. It shows Anakin asking where all of the servants of Dooku have been taken, why it is being mysteriously hidden from the rest of the Jedi Order. This is where Mace Windu turns hostile and commands Anakin to let it go. Obi-Wan even stands up from his seat and talks to Anakin into leaving the room before he makes things even worse with Windu and the rest of the council. After Anakin leaves the chambers, the Masters begin to discuss the truth of a thing that they are calling the Prism, a secret Jedi-led prison facility meant to house users of the dark side. It is revealed that this was a prison that was built all the way back during the 100-Year Darkness, the very war which led to the creation of the Sith. The Jedi had housed the Force's most dangerous psychopaths there for thousands of years without anyone, even the Republic, even Palpatine knowing about it. This was information only privy to certain members of the High Council. In the recording, Yoda and Mace Windu permitted Obi-Wan to go and visit the Prism in order to ensure that the living conditions were up to standard. Upon learning this information though, which confirmed his suspicions, Darth Vader flew into a rage and destroyed the council chambers, flinging all of their chairs out the window. But at least now he possessed the knowledge of where he could hide the Emperor. No one would find him in the Prism. Finding his way back to the Emperor with this new information, Vader and the group departed for the fourth moon of Diab, where the Prism lay secretly on the verge of the very fringes of the galaxy. Upon their arrival, they discovered the floating prison to be entirely self-sustaining, still operational. It was watched by a single sentient Jedi Master and a skeleton crew of droids. The Jedi Warden came out to greet the group, stating that she had thought that she had been forgotten by the Council. The woman had no idea that the Jedi Order had even fallen. She would die eventually though to Vader's lightsaber, never knowing the truth, with the Jedi never even getting a chance to say her name. The Sith Lord's assumptions about the prison were ultimately correct. Their medical facilities were top of the line. The Jedi would never allow anything less. Using strange spider-like medical droids, the Prism's infirmary began to heal the still unconscious Palpatine, flushing his system of the pathogen. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Tom searched the system out of his own curiosity and discovered that 206 dangerous Force-based criminals were still alive and being housed there, and over half of them had been arrested by a Jedi by the name of Anakin Skywalker. Vader ordered for all of the information to be uploaded to their ship, and the systems wiped. But before he did that, Moff Tracta used it to find the fallen Jedi that had caused his own injury during the Clone War, wanting revenge. When he found him, Tracta proceeded to beat the Jedi to death, the same way that he had done to the medical droid. But the prison gave Lieutenant Tom an idea. He proposed that Vader be the one that actually used the prisoners of the Prism as their own private army to retake Coruscant. His plan was to release all of the prisoners from their cells, offer them a taste of freedom, and give them the chance to join them and to fight on Coruscant as a dark side army. But Vader had other plans. Once the inmates were all freed, Vader instructed them to fight to the death. Only the survivors would earn the right to join them. And with this, the prison erupted into total chaos. All of Dooku's former servants, mass murderers, began a bloodbath of their own, and Vader watched intently. During the fight, Tom was protected by Shonan Volta, one of Dooku's snipers who would use the Force to guide blaster bolts after she had fired them. She was able to guide the lieutenant to keep him safe during the savage violence of the riot. It was clear that his loyalty to Vader had gotten him far more than he had bargained for. Elsewhere in the prison, Vader was cutting down security droids and any of the inmates that were foolish enough to challenge him directly. This included Baron Nax Servan, who was a fallen Jedi recruited by Count Dooku early in the Clone Wars. He had been arrested by Anakin Skywalker and Kit Fisto, and after taking him into custody, they had learned that he had been kidnapping Force-sensitive children for Dooku. He had been tracked down and nearly beaten to death by Anakin Skywalker before he was stopped. Although the Baron had no idea about Vader's true identity, it was time for a rematch, and Vader's blood boiled. The Baron believed that if he defeated the Dark Lord, then all of the prisoners would crown him as the new leader. But when he flipped over Vader's head, the Sith just grabbed him by his ponytail as Vader slammed him into the ground, pressing the tip of his own lightsaber into Servan's throat, burning the surface of his flesh until he yielded, with the Dark Jedi begging for his life, promising that he would pledge his service to Vader. Finally, he ordered the riot to cease and had Moff Tracta issue a galvanizing speech to the survivors that they were now members of the Empire. He convinced them that they were to right the wrongs of the Old Republic, that if the prisoners fought for them, that they would be free as Imperials. The inmates kneeled and became Darth Vader's private army. Of the 206 initial inmates, only 33 survived the riot and would join Darth Vader on his crusade. With all of this occurring, Gentis was carrying out his own master plan. He lured Grand Moff Tarkin to Coruscant and captured him as well. His big desire was to gain as much information as he could about the Death Star. With the Death Star, Gentis knew he could become the new Emperor and rule the galaxy with no more need for any soldiers. He also learned that he could protect all of his cadets, that this super weapon would be the only force he would ever need. Gentis was also convinced that Palpatine had died of his injuries at this point, and that the insurrection was complete. But he was completely blindsided when Vader took a secret hyperlane back to Coruscant with his own private army of madmen. To announce his arrival at the palace, Vader releases a force repulse that sends dozens of terrorists flying back at the entrance. Although the forces of Gentis outnumbered Vader 8-1, they were no match for a Dark Lord, bitter exiled Jedi, and multi-limbed gunslingers, cybernetically enhanced war heroes, and straight-up serial killers, fighting with complete unpredictability. The cadet demolition experts attempted to use grenades to scatter their lines, but the sharpshooter Sean on Volta sniped the grenade out of their hands and caused it to explode right within the cadet ranks. Lieutenant Tom himself shot Gentis' son, one of his former friends that had trapped him in the starfighter to begin with. And when the headmaster rushed to his son's body in a panic, he suddenly found himself lighting up like a power conductor when volts of pure dark side energy coursed through his body. The Emperor had also descended from the shuttle, alive, recovered, rejuvenated by the power of the darkness. Fueled by revenge, he raises his arms and unleashes a torrent of force lightning so powerful, it may just be one of the deadliest that we have ever seen in all of the lore. He chars the headmaster's blackened skeletal corpse within seconds, as he feels the pure wrath of Palpatine's hatred. In the aftermath, Tracta was promoted to Grand Moff and given Gentis' position as headmaster of the Imperial Academies. Tom then oversaw the rounding up and execution of the rest of the cadets and insurgents. And as for Lord Vader's criminal army, Vader allowed them all to be loaded onto a transport and to exiled. They had attained their freedom for their service, but they were too dangerous to be left running around in the Empire. But of course, that very same exile transport exploded as soon as it took off. Vader decided that they were too dangerous to be left alive, and Tom was promoted to the rank of Admiral by Palpatine himself. Palpatine was impressed by the boy's cunning and his ruthlessness. He had praised Vader for training him well, and even mentioned as a passing insult that if Vader should ever die, that Tom could make a worthy successor. But this did not sit well with Vader, who decided to give the boy one final lesson for his career as an Imperial Admiral. Vader lifted the boy up by his shirt and hurled him down into the endless depths of Coruscant. The last thing he said was that he would never tolerate rivals. And now we have reached the final arc of Darth Vader's first year in his suit. In the aftermath of Gentis' coup and the attempt on the Emperor's life, Vader is tasked with overseeing the building project of a new Imperial palace. However, he had little interest in a construction project. Under the table, Vader had decided to continue his search for remaining Jedi, attempting to keep it hidden from his master. It seems his trip to the temple, seeing the recording of the High Council, whet his appetite for more Jedi blood, and he sought more revenge. However, at this time, Vader was not having a lot of success. He was still obsessed with finding the Jedi Das Janir, the Jedi who had eluded him for months now, and he continued to personally train the assassin known as Falco Sang, who had become the perfect person to hunt and locate Jedi. But all attempts to find this Jedi were all ending up in dead ends. One of his officers kept asking him to turn his attention and issues regarding a separatist refugee camp on the world of Arkinia, but Vader refused to pay attention and told him not to bother him about it any longer. Of course, unbeknownst to Vader, on Arkinia, this was the place where the Jedi Master Kakruk was alive, aiding in a group of surviving Jedi younglings, hiding them from safety. And without the Dark Lord's involvement, Kakruk was successful, but he would have certainly died had Vader listened. Kakruk would actually go on to serve in Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order, and would outlive even Luke himself, becoming a sort of pseudo-Grand Master in the Legacy era. All of this because Vader didn't listen to an underling. Several months would pass, and Vader's fixation on the Jedi remained. Falco had attempted to escape his imprisonment under the Dark Lord, but was only stopped once more by Vader and brought back. Elsewhere, Janir and the Master Sadet had made a plot to get rid of the Dark Lord themselves, as they would be able to weaken the Empire's growing strength. They planned on using themselves and a few of their fellow Jedi survivors as bait to lure Vader into a trap, but of course we all know how well that worked out for the Jedi on Kessel. Sidious ended up being the one to discover this and would leak the location of Das Janir and his gathering. Palpatine had also figured out that Vader had put his lieutenant on the search for Jedi survivors against his wishes, and Sidious had decided to give the information to the lieutenant. This drew Vader right into the Jedi's trap on the world of Kestavel, but with Vader on his way, the Jedi gathering was facing troubles of their own. The Verpine Jedi Master Sadet had been secretly working for the Emperor this entire time, and had been turned to the dark side behind closed doors, becoming a rat and informant to the Emperor. The Jedi revealed that shortly after Order 66, he was brought in with several other Jedi to meet Sidious in his private chambers. He returned their lightsabers to them, and instructed them all to fight to the death. The final survivor would get to go free. Obviously though, the 5 Jedi teamed up to attack the Emperor, and that is when Palpatine revealed himself as a Dark Lord of the Sith. And drawing his own lightsaber, he used his blinding speed and ferocity, the likes of which they had never encountered before. Palpatine had offered them hope, and then smashed it just to see their reaction. The Jedi Master Sadet had decided to save his own life and betrayed his friends, pledging himself to the Empire as a double agent. He had been the one to leak where they were meeting to Palpatine, who in turn told the lieutenant, who had informed Lord Vader. Vader arrived with a clone trooper battalion on the world of Kestaval, only to have their bridge that they were marching across flooded with engine fuel and lit on fire. Only Darth Vader would survive, as he leapt out of the way while his entire contingent was torched, burned to death. Making his way inside of the stronghold, he was stopped by a Jedi Master by the name of Kai Hedora. Their duel doesn't last long, as Hedora makes the mistake of thinking that Vader is simply a droid like Grievous was. He uses the Force, and hurls many objects at him while running away, as he attempts to threaten Vader with a bomb. Oh, how far the Jedi have fallen. But that's when Vader hurls his lightsaber, slashes off the Jedi's hand, proving that he was wrong about so much. The Dark Lord ended the Jedi's life, and proceeded to continue his search for Das Janir through the Force. He believed he found him when he entered a room, only to find Sadet strapped to the chair. Janir and his friends had once again deceived him and had escaped. Vader interrogated the Jedi who had turned, and learned that he was also an agent of Palpatine's, that it was him, Sadet, that had leaked the information. These Jedi were proving to be clever. Sadet made the mistake of thinking that they were on the same side, referring to Sidious as our master to Darth Vader. Both enraged at losing the Jedi yet again, and discovering another potential rival underneath him, Vader executes Sadet on the spot. There was nothing left for him now but to return to Coruscant, and to continue to service the Empire, as the very first year of Darth Vader, the very first year of Anakin within his suit, officially comes to a close, thus marking a definitive end to Darth Vader's first year. From the moment he awoke from the table, Vader had an incredibly busy year. His rage didn't allow him to rest for even a moment. It was said that his prosthetics seemed to make him suffer more during inactivity, so Vader kept moving. That being the case, he welcomed every challenge that came his year. But that's not to say he welcomed every mission that Palpatine had for him. He had to clench his teeth through excruciatingly boring work at times, and even disobeyed his master just to feel like his abilities were being put to good use. Sounds familiar? He and Palpatine had very different ideals on what the Empire should look like, and what it required to grow in its infancy. Based on all of the threats that Vader put an end to, it's difficult to say who was correct. But this is just us seeing the last vestiges of Anakin's rebellious side, his independence shining through in Lord Vader. As after this, Vader will continue to transform, so it's fascinating to see a young Empire, as well as a still wounded animal, a wounded predator in the form of Darth Vader in this first year. It's some of his most fascinating stories. He's the most vulnerable, he's still adjusting. He's not the fully fledged Dark Lord that he will be in the years that will follow. This first year is fascinating because Palpatine also got to feel what the Jedi Council constantly felt, as Vader went off to do his own things rather than obey direct orders. It's a fascinating contrast, but in doing this, the newly crowned Sith Lord went on a journey of self-discovery. He He had first come to terms with what he had done, what his new body was like, and then he had to repair his relationship to the Force itself. This meant learning that he must use the dark side to bend the Force to his will, rather than serve it willingly. Vader also learned to use his armor to his advantage, enjoying the feeling of power, ruling through fear. But he also had to outgrow his soldier-like mentality, figure out how to become a ruler, an oppressor, turning himself from a warlord into a true tyrant. In a matter of months, his name became widespread, legend in nearly every corner in the galaxy, dark corners especially. Every officer knew to obey the Emperor's executioner. Every citizen's head would bow when the shadow of his helmet passed. Every Jedi would become paralyzed with fear when he heard his rasping breaths from the shadows, and sometimes even in their dreams. This is Darth Vader, and this was only his first year. But anyway, my friends, thank you so much for watching this longer video and documentary on Anakin Skywalker's first year as Darth Vader. We have a few other documentary style videos that we have planned, but would love to hear your input below. We plan on making an entire video dedicated to the creation of the Jedi Order, much like how we did with the origin of evil and the 12 Dark Jedi. We would also love to document Palpatine's first year as Emperor, and again, Darth Vader's second year. So of these, which would you guys like to see the most? Also, if you enjoyed this type of video, we also made a Gods and Monsters, which is a supernatural encounters book exploration. Basically a deep analysis on the creation of the Star Wars galaxy that we know it, set 5 million years before the Clone Wars. But anyway, my friends, and fellow scholars and students of the Force, thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video. And as always, may the Force be with you.